So that's exactly what we see happening for deep tech over the next 20 years. It's such an exciting time, in my opinion, for deep tech because the rules are still unwritten for deep tech. So if you and I were making PayPal in the 90s,
it'd be so much easier now. Yeah.
It'd be deep tech back then, right? We need a full team. We need scientists. We need researchers.
So now we are recording.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. My name is Brannon Jones. As you mentioned, I'm an investor at AlleyCorp on our deep tech team. And AlleyCorp's an early stage venture capital firm. We're headquartered in New York City. Generally, we're pre-seed and seed, maybe a little bit of Series A stage of companies where we'll invest. But we'll come in at the earliest rounds. We often like to be the first check, and everybody in our company, regardless of which specific vertical they work on, has an operating background. So we really feel like we can, one, lean in and be helpful, but two, even just sympathize with the founders on a personal level. So I've been at AlleyCorp for 2 years now as part of our deep tech team. We have 4 teams in total, so 3 other teams. So deep tech. We have our diversified investing team, which will handle the majority of our software investments and kind of sector agnostic. We've got our healthcare investments, and then we've got our economic infrastructure team. That'll be our 4th team, and they focus a lot on workforce development, a little bit of food insecurity, education technology, things like that. So, that's us in a nutshell. Started as the family office of our CEO, an entrepreneur named Kevin Ryan, longtime entrepreneur in the New York ecosystem, actually many decades. Career marked by success in the entrepreneurial sphere. Started out at DoubleClick, sold that to Google, founded MongoDB, founded Zola, Business Insider, Gilt Group, and some others that I'm sure I'm forgetting. Yeah, but a lot of success, and in many ways was one of the earliest people in tech in NYC. And won an award as the godfather of tech in NYC last year at the kind of this Tech Hall of Fame thing. But actually it reflects and harkens to our name, AlleyCorp. So it takes the name from back when they were coining the term Silicon Alley to be the East Coast counterpart to Silicon Valley, which was happening in the West Coast. And this was all happening a few decades ago when he was doing DoubleClick, and he was trying to bring tech talent from California to New York and convince them to come here and say, hey, things are happening. It's happening now. It's exciting. And so he got this big billboard in Soho and put it up and said, welcome to Silicon Alley, and wanted to coin that term. And that's actually how the term Silicon Alley came about, but it's the roots of our name, AlleyCorp. So that's what we call the fund because of that.
Hell yeah. Awesome. So a lot to talk about there. What do you think of the New York tech scene in general? Like, I'm not too familiar with it. I'd love to hear what you think about it, how it's going. I don't know. How is it in general?
Yeah. New York tech scene, I mean, I was going to say pleasantly surprised, but I shouldn't even be surprised. I would just say pleased. It is growing. It is growing in terms of people. It's growing in terms of productivity. We are adding jobs. So the tech scene is actually growing very fast in New York. And according to some measurements, like one of the faster growing ecosystems. I always think about the New York and East Coast tech scene from the deep tech lens and standpoint, of course, because that's where I invest in. Maybe I should also pause and say what I actually think deep tech is.
Sure.
Because people always ask me that. But broadly speaking, it's kind of science-based innovations. And we think of it, what we call deep tech for us is robotics, aerospace type startups, advanced manufacturing, and then finally a little bit of energy transition. And we really pick those areas because, again, we have operator backgrounds. Those are the areas where we have experience. So my background was as a mechanical and aerospace engineer, as a roboticist. Then I was at SpaceX. I worked in both the Falcon program, which is their legacy program, launching and landing rockets. And I worked in their R&D program, Raptor, as well. I was building robotic factories to build the first versions of Raptor, which is the primary engine for their Starship vehicle, which at a minimum is going to dramatically expand rideshare access to space for people who want to send satellites up there. But eventually will also be the vehicle that takes humanity to Mars and beyond. So that was a lot of fun. Then from there, went and ran my own startup, both a hardware startup and an AI software startup, and then business school. And then after that, AlleyCorp.
What was your hardware startup?
So it was in the fitness space. And so we were using thermoelectrics to make ice packs. And the CTO had come up with a novel way to rapidly cool that wasn't fan-based. So you'll see like Theragun or Hyperice, they've got these fan-based cooling systems that you could wrap around a knee. It's like embedded into a knee wrap. But we had a thermoelectric way that could get much colder, much more able to control. And so you could go ahead and set your whole routine, 20 minutes normal, 20 minutes cold, on and off, and you could have it wrapped and it could be much colder. So I was running PCB design for them for about, I was with them for about 5 months. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. Quick stint, that one. Yeah, there were some other team dynamics that I think made it a place where I wasn't sure about how long to stay around, but it was really fun and a great experience.
Yeah, sometimes startups are chaotic for sure. Okay, so we've talked about New York. Tell me, so you've mentioned a little bit of your background. What did you? So are you a mechanical engineer by trade, or what's your trade?
Yeah, mechanical engineer by training, mechanical and aerospace technically. I studied that at Princeton, and basically really specialized in robotics. And so that's what I was doing there. And then that's also why it kind of made sense to be implementing robotic factories at SpaceX. And actually, speaking of Princeton, makes me want to say one more thing about your prior question about the New York ecosystem, which is that from the deep tech standpoint, yes, California has the most density in terms of deep tech startups. Boston, like deep tech per capita, is maybe number 2, but New York is coming up really fast at number 3. And when originally, that's the normal response. You're kind of a little bit surprised by that. But actually, when you think about it, it does tend to make a lot of sense. So, of course, what everyone thinks, yes, we have a very mature capital stack here with so many funders in the ecosystem and a very mature financial industry. Secondly, we have some of the top deep tech institutions in the world right nearby. So again, I was Princeton, New Jersey, right across the water. You've got Yale here, you've got NYU here, you've got Columbia here, you've got Carnegie Mellon down the way. I don't know, we could kind of co-opt Penn into that space. And so you've got really a nexus of really high caliber institutions that put out great science. So that's number 2. Number 3 is just the pure diversity of New York, one of the most diverse cities in the country. And then, of course, it's also dense as well. So because of that, talent wants to be here. Talent is here. You can find what you're looking for. And then finally, because kind of the political capital the city has, it's an important city. It's one that sets many trends, both culturally, but also from a regulatory standpoint. So all those things kind of come to make this confluence that actually makes it make sense for there to be deep tech startups. And I think there should be more deep tech startups here in New York. I think that's one of the reasons why we will continue to see more. And actually, people forget New York has a really deep legacy of deep tech, actually. So the electric grid, invented by Thomas Edison, here. The first industrial robots were installed in Trenton for GM, building cars. Bell Labs was both semiconductors and telecom right there in Princeton. There was lots of aviation. Some of the first flights happened on Long Island. And there's a bunch of other industrial stuff that I'm even forgetting. But New York has such a rich legacy of contributing in extremely important technologies. I think semiconductor to the world. And so it actually makes sense to see some of this resurgence in deep tech here in New York City. And selfishly, it's one of those opportunities where you come to a major city and there's awesome ingredients for an area and a community that actually hasn't really been cultivated or really brought to bear in a way. And so we at AlleyCorp want to be some of those people to help bring up that deep tech community here in New York.
Okay. So when you say New York, do you mean like Manhattan or the surrounding areas or New York State? Because when I think of Manhattan, I think very space constrained. And that to me doesn't necessarily scream deep tech. Like you can have a lot of the design and coding and things like this. But how are you thinking of this?
Yeah. To be fair, I do think we think about it more broadly and holistically. Certainly the nexus of talent is here close to Manhattan or in Brooklyn. But upstate New York does a lot. There's a lot of agriculture. There's a lot of shipping. There's a lot of ports. There's a lot, tons of transportation. And the majority of it actually comes down there through there to actually get into Manhattan. And so New York State broadly, but even the kind of tri-state area, as I sort of mentioned and roped into, this whole northeastern area really centered around and ground anchored by New York. But it could be kind of dispersed even into New Jersey. There are some more industrial areas, and we have some of our companies who find a lot of their work there, either in construction or otherwise. Manhattan itself has some pretty unique characteristics that could make sense for certain deep tech companies. But I do agree, like at the macro level, it probably would involve some of the surrounding area. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah. Okay. Hell yeah. So at AlleyCorp, are you primarily funding New York-based companies, or are you guys funding companies all over the place, or how does this work?
Yeah. So we are geography agnostic. We end up funding a good number of New York-based companies because we're here, boots on the ground in those ecosystem, hosting events for the scientists at Columbia and NYU, know them well. And so they come to us first. We've got a great relationship. Now, but again, that's not prescriptive. And probably half of the investments in our deep tech portfolio are actually on the West Coast. But we've even got some that are outside of the US. And that wouldn't be too abnormal for us. I think one of the things we try to prioritize, especially early, like being an early investor, an early stage investor, is that we want to invest somewhere that we can want to get to because we want to go there. We want to see the tech. We want to be helpful. We want to know the team. We want to have that relationship. Those things make the difference in early stage far more than in late stage. So, probably 50% of them are on the West Coast. The rest are scattered or throughout the East Coast. But we've got some in Boston. We've got some here and otherwise.
Okay. Hell yeah. So when you talk about growing the New York ecosystem, it's like you're going to events, you're going to the universities, this kind of thing, and they talk to you first. So this is like a good way to help New York become more of a deep tech place. Is that fair, or what do you think?
Yeah. That's absolutely right. It's a good way to make deep tech more prevalent in New York, and it brings it to be top of mind because again, all the ingredients are actually here already. It's just we want to stir people to action. We want to give them that impetus to actually take those steps. And some of that is training, knowledge, pathways, access into entrepreneurship for scientists. Because it's actually pretty challenging to navigate the world of entrepreneurship.
Oh, totally.
If you're a PhD, postdoc, industry researcher. I even think about myself as an engineer in industry and just understanding the way into entrepreneurship. It's pretty ambiguous. So some of the things that we'll do just to be practical about this is like, we would even work with universities to sponsor research at a lab and say, hey, if this research gets to a certain location, certain milestone, we would spin this out. We would help start up this company because I guess I should have said this at the beginning. AlleyCorp is also a venture studio. Part of that DNA where I told you.
What does it mean? I don't know what a venture studio is.
Yeah, absolutely. So a venture studio is a firm that will also start new startups from scratch. So we'll come up with the ideas and we're like a professional team, professionally starting new startups from scratch. And that comes from, again, the legacy of Kevin Ryan I mentioned, because he started MongoDB from scratch. He started Zola, Business Insider, Guildcorp. He started all these companies. And so we've got a really strong muscle in terms of how do you start a company in many very disparate industries. How do you start a company and make one that's successful? What do you look for in a founding team? How do you run it at the beginning? How do you get yourself set up? And so that is one of the things that we do pride ourselves on. So when we're talking about nucleating the deep tech industry here in New York City, one of the core ways we do that is interacting with all of those great resources that I mentioned to say, hey, can we bring them together and rally it around an idea, a technology, a team, give them the funding they need, give them the infrastructure they need, give them the business plan, support them as a firm, and let those teams go and build companies and be really successful. So in deep tech in particular, some of the ways that's looked has been through the universities, as I mentioned. But that, I think, is a key piece of building the ecosystem, as well as drawing awareness to the ecosystem. And as we continue to see winners, great companies that are built and funded in New York City and in the area, investors will begin to understand what that looks like, begin to be able to really intuitively understand how to invest in those companies, get excited about them. And of course, we want to be the champions and biggest cheerleaders for that wave.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, let's see, we talked about a plan at the beginning. I think I want to pivot just a little bit. And what I want to do now is talk about some of the portfolio that you guys have. And then what I'd like to do from there is just ask a lot of questions about the investment climate and your perspective on investing in robotics companies and a bunch of things around this. But so tell me about your portfolio. Tell me about the robotics companies or general deep tech companies that you have. I'd love to hear kind of the stage, when you were involved, and it'd be very cool to say how you're helping them in addition to funding them. I know it's a lot, but I'd love to see how it goes.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it. I want to see how it goes too. So we've got about 18 deep tech companies right now, and that's across robotics, aerospace, manufacturing, energy. Now, initially, when we started building out this deep tech team, because it's been at AlleyCorp for about 3 years now, it started as purely robotics. And that made sense for a lot of reasons. The biggest reason is that technological readiness level for robotics is the highest among pretty much any deep tech technology that you would still consider deep tech, where there's still a good amount of scientific research that needs to be done to bring that company or that technology to bear.
So you're saying there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, basically, in robotics, given the state of technology?
That's exactly right. That is exactly how we felt when we came up with the conceptualization for our deep tech vertical. So we started in robotics. So majority of our companies are in robotics. And then a little over a year ago, we expanded to add on the other categories that I mentioned. So I'll talk through a couple maybe, or one or so in each of those different areas. But on the robotic side, one of the companies that, we're excited about all of our companies. One of the companies I'll mention is EyeBot, EYE bot. And the name, they eponymously named EyeBot. They give eye exams. It's a kiosk that can be placed in a public location that has a lot of foot traffic. And a person can come up to that kiosk, stand a couple feet away, and get an eye exam in 90 seconds. It'll test all the visual acuity. It'll even give them the option to buy the prescription right there on the touch screen that's embedded in the kiosk. So you can go get it, cheap price. Then you can also even buy contacts or glasses right there too that will get mailed to your house or wherever you want it to.
What a clever idea.
Nice it's a great idea. It's like in a way. It doesn't spit out the eyeglasses itself, but yeah, it is to the point you're making, a familiar kind of a form factor that people are used to. And what's interesting, 60% of people in the world need glasses, and many of them.
You say 60%? That's crazy.
Yeah, 65% need vision correction. Yeah,
wild.
So huge market. So many people need this. And of course, right now, everybody has to go to the eye doctor annually or every 6 months, get your prescription. It's kind of a hassle that doesn't really need to exist when you think about it, like just from an engineering lens, a first principles kind of thinking lens.
Love it.
Why does it need to be that way? And so this team has come up with some really, really exciting refractory technology that sends light into your eyes. You don't have to be super close to it. It comes back extremely accurate. And they did a bunch of tests comparing the fit of the contacts and glasses to a human doctor, and it's actually better. Now, we still have human doctors approve everything. And so it ends up being a seamless experience for the user. But they're doing really well. And they're one that we're excited to back. And so they're not so much traditional robot as you might think of, many moving parts. And we do have robots. So we're here for that too. But that's more of a hardware play, but kind of gives you a representation of something that we were excited about. And the kind of fundamental thesis behind that is really democratization of access. And that'll actually be a key theme that you see across our theses, how we decide what we want to invest in across those deep tech verticals. But democratization.
What do you mean?
For example, EyeBot is democratization of access to yeah, exactly. But it's broadening accessibility, whether that's reducing cost barriers or otherwise. And so in many ways, our investments in the space sector are really thinking about that broadened access and the infrastructure that needs to be built to support that. So when you have something like SpaceX, dramatically reducing cost of getting to space, like orders of magnitude, probably 100x now, is probably, in today's dollars, $100,000 per kilogram in 1980 if we're sending stuff up for the space shuttle. By the time we get to Falcon 1, maybe it's 10,000. Falcon 9 is maybe 5,000. Falcon Heavy is maybe 1,000. So we've already seen 100x. And then you're talking about Starship, which is supposed to be on the order of hundreds of dollars per kilogram, maybe $100 per kilogram is what they're trying to hit.
Bonkers.
1,000x reduction in price to get to space. Like, if you make anything 1,000 times cheaper, people are going to start doing that thing. So that's what we think about democratization. Okay, so let's say people start doing that thing. Okay, what breaks in the system next? What needs to exist? What kind of infrastructure?
What are the next bottlenecks? I see.
What are the next
bottlenecks? Bottleneck after bottleneck to get things more efficient.
That's right. Yeah. People start putting things in space. Those things are going to need to get monitored. They're going to need to get maintained. They'll need to get moved around. They'll need to be protected, whether that's, cyber counterintelligence, those kinds of things. So it, just really, really helps to think about the future and help you see around corners in that way when you think about, okay, here's the democratizing trend. Anytime we see democratization of this and there's massive uptake, it creates new industries. And
so I guess when you democratize something, you give access to it, and that creates growth. And that's something that you as investors are interested in, because if more people, it's like a network effect kind of thing where it gets more and more
100%.
valuable.
100%.
Okay, that's a cool way to look at it. So you democratize things, and that leads to growth, and that's why it might be a good investment. Cool.
Yeah. And we sort of think, maybe this is one of those investor type phrases, but we sort of think of it as the nonlinear unlock. When you can get, like, so many technologies start within government or DoD or a niche use case, and then they commercialize. And that's the nonlinear unlock. When you can bring them to the masses, that's the democratizing moment. That's when you really see massive uptake. So that's kind of the sort of example that we are interested in. And then you see that across, semiconductors, which started, I guess, how did semiconductors started to calculate missile trajectories for the government because they literally didn't have enough compute to make sure the missiles got where they needed to be. But now they're in every single electronics device. And that's when you think about the nonlinear, because the cost came down enough. So things like that is what are the sort of trends we're trying to back, and how do we support those changes as they're coming? And so,
one thing that's interesting to me is that kind of thinking is what has led to a lot of investment in software as a service models, from my perspective. But you guys are going into deep tech as well as a few other areas. But how are you thinking of this? Because the point of software as a service is like you code it once, anyone can use it. And that's why it's been a fairly sexy business model. But so why deep tech, and how are you thinking about it kind of coexisting within this scaling framework?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So SaaS has been a great business model. It's shown itself to be that way. But it is probably important to remember that it didn't exist 20 years ago. And it almost was an emergent, crazy. It was an emergent business model. The rules for SaaS, rule of 40, whatever asset intensity you should have, what your net dollar retention should be, all those financial terms people you use to quantify whether or not a SaaS business is good, those didn't exist 20 years ago. And they happened from investors saying, oh, I see that the internet is changing everything, that the access to software, again, democratization of people being able to build tools is changing everything. And they almost had to just believe that people were solving a real problem. And then over time, it's almost a lagging measure where you went back and you said, oh, here are the traits of this business. I want to find traits in other businesses
Similar.
that match that. And that's what we think. So that's exactly what we see happening for deep tech over the next 20 years. It's such an exciting time, in my opinion, for deep tech because the rules are still unwritten for deep tech. We see all these changes. We see improvements in both semiconductor cost and performance. We see falling hardware costs. We see aging demographic. Obviously, we see all the improvements in AI in the hype around it. We see improvements in connectivity and 5G. We see demand for e-commerce and shipping and more need for those kinds of logistics and automation. And then obviously, there's all the questions about global competitiveness, deglobalization, reshoring manufacturing, revitalizing industry here. All of those kind of come together and say, okay, this is going to be an exciting time for deep tech. And we really believe those are going to drive demand and make some really, really big companies, on the scale of which we haven't really seen in mass in deep tech yet. And that's kind of what makes it most exciting. Now, back to SaaS, we're thinking about it still, obviously great business models, but in a way for us as deep tech investors, the investing style and strategy is changing within SaaS because it's a more known entity. And also because AI in many ways is leading to the commoditization of production of software tools, right? So if you and I were making PayPal in the 90s,
it'd be so much easier now. Yeah.
It'd be deep tech back then, right? We need a full team. We need scientists. We need researchers. Today, we just need a weekend and a couple good AI agents. I mean, probably we're vibe coding, just text, speaking it, and then it's coding for us.
Yeah.
And so you see that trend. And what that really means is I think it's going to be potentially harder to deploy massive amounts of funding into software as the costs continue to drop, which is a good thing for everybody that the costs continue to drop, that people are seeing productive tools. Deep tech, again, is the untamed frontier. Still wild with the creativity of all the scientists out there in the natural world and all these incredible scientific discoveries. And so I think that will be able to invest many different ventures. Two, I think the deep tech investors who are leading the way there will set the standard for what it looks like to invest in deep tech. They'll set the standard. They'll set the rules. They'll make up the new metrics and heuristics that the industry will adopt over the next 20 years as we continue to see winners. And that's what we want to do. That's what I want to do. That's when I'm answering your question on how I think about SaaS, why I'm excited about deep tech. That's one of the reasons why I am so excited, because it also can be some of the most transformative technologies. Even if I was talking about Bell Labs earlier, so they're on my mind. But even if you think about all the work they did around telecommunications, vacuum tube, all of that, we wouldn't have modern phones if they hadn't been working on that. And even that scientific discovery, hard research, just think about how much communication has totally revolutionized.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we're
totally
talking, you're in New York, I'm in Texas. It's crazy.
That's right. That's right. So deep tech companies have the ability to be the most transformative. Cars, phones, semiconductors, planes, to really shape culture, really shape our environment. And so it's not that I see anything wrong with SaaS businesses or like they're not exciting to me. But when I just think about impact for dollar, I get really excited about deep tech and how it could literally shape our physical infrastructure or culture or environment, those kinds of things.
Oh, everything. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in talking about a lot of the things you mentioned, the hype, deglobalization, these kinds of things. But let's keep going with your portfolio. So we have this EyeBot one that seems really cool. You mentioned a little bit of space. I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Yeah. We've got a great new space investment. And this one we are so excited about. It's actually probably our first actual space investment now, because I told you we kind of expanded into deep tech recently. We've been looking at the space sector, but still, space is still emerging. It's still nascent. It's still dominated by the major players. And so we've been trying to pick our investments pretty selectively. So this will be our first one. This one is called Portal Space, and we are so excited about them. They are building a new type of thruster for satellites for in-space movement. So your satellite can navigate around. they offer 10 to 20 times as much thrust as what's now available on most satellites. If you and I were going to put a satellite up there.
Okay. I don't really know the state of satellite satellite tech for this kind of thing. So 10 to 20 times sounds like a huge improvement.
It's huge.
How's it done now? How are they doing it?
Yeah, so space is all about conservation of momentum, is the way that people move around. So you take a pressurized can and you squeeze it and it shoots out and you fly back the other way. And that is how satellite thrusters
you shoot out mass in one direction.
You shoot out mass. And functionally, that's what every rocket thruster for a satellite or an engine for an actual rocket does. I mean, that's what our Raptor engines do. They just shoot out a ton of mass. And the more you heat it up, the more mass you can shoot out without using up all your fuel. So
bonkers.
What they have, it's bonkers. It is bonkers. And you look at the efficiency and they are just like fractions of a percent.
Yeah, totally crazy.
Incredible machines though. And so what they've done is they are building a system to actually very efficiently use a liquid propellant and shoot it out very fast without needing to implement many moving parts or a lot of energy even. And so because of that, they can do that at high flow rates. High flow rates means they're basically putting out a lot of fuel. If you put out a lot of fuel very fast, you get a lot of thrust going the other way. And the insight actually came from an engineer who was an engineering leader at SpaceX for a long time, developing the Raptor engine. So the Raptor engines I built, he designed. I didn't know him at the time. Yeah. But
super cool.
Definitely always fun to connect through the SpaceX network. And that was where the core insight came from. And this actually makes me, just talk about the future of deep tech in terms of we're seeing some deep tech winners in the Teslas, the Andurils, the SpaceX.
Oh yeah, totally.
And the mafias meaning the alumni from them who leave them and start companies are bringing so much knowledge, not only technical knowledge, like from a research standpoint, but knowledge about how you actually build a company. How do you actually get a whole bunch of engineers who all think they know the right way and no one else does and get them to productively move forward at incredible speeds? That's what they're bringing, and that is what the startup world has needed for deep tech. So that's one of the big catalytic changes. That's why we're so excited about Portal.
So anything else to mention on this Portal space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason that we like them, and I guess this is one piece I didn't say, is they provide infrastructure for the new space economy. So when you say, okay, maybe there's 10,000 satellites in space, and we think there's going to be 10 times that in the next 10 years. Well, mobility becomes extremely important. When you think about national security, when you think about monitoring, mobility becomes extremely important. And so if they have the most mobile platform, they are providing infrastructure that everybody will need, government will need, commercial will need. And that's why we think it's a democratizing trend, because even if you can commission their satellite to go and do an operation for you, and it's in space, you don't have to launch anything up there. You can just rent time and have it go do something for you, move around your satellite, check something out. You're making access to space actually tenable and affordable. So that's one of the reasons why we're really pumped about them. So that's one in space. So I give you a robot one. I give you a space one. I give you a one that
I'd love more of a robot one, because the eyeglasses one, I mean, my thought on robot is as long as it senses, thinks, and acts with, I think these vending machines that do your glasses do, or like scan your eyes do, but any like mobile robots, robotic arm stuff, I don't know,
we got it
humanoids,
all.
whatever else you got.
We got it all, baby. Okay, so let me tell you about the next one. So I'll give you one more that you like. This is a New York one for you. And I also think shows a great example of how robots are starting to have that nonlinear unlock by breaking into traditionally non-automated sectors. This one is called Aescape. It's spelled like escape, but with an A at the beginning, Aescape. Yeah. They are a robotic massage table. So you imagine a massage table. It's got two robotic arms on top. They've got specialized ends that allow them to actually perform the massage like a masseuse. You lay on the table. You're looking at an iPad beneath. That's a flat panel. And you see basically your own body. Now, you wear a special type of athletic wear that has these micro sensors in it that the robot's trained to see. So you get your own, just like you wear your Lululemon to the gym, you wear your Aescape.
So it gets your shape, because your shape is super hard to detect and stuff. So you have these markers, and so that's how you get the body texture, say.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And then the robotic arms come and give you massage. You can then freely choose where you want it to be. You can adjust the pressure. You can control the music in the room. You can control the lighting. And they are doing phenomenally well. They just raised an $83 million Series B to expand the robotic massage technology.
Wow. They're already scaling out. That's awesome.
Yeah. They're doing great. And they're just down the street here in New York. So that's what I'm saying. There are fantastic robotics companies that are emerging here on the East Coast. But you think about New York is probably the right place for that, because they'll be able to expand within luxury gyms, hotel chains. That's where they've seen a ton of traction. And it's an industry that is, dull, dirty, dangerous, the things that people talk about being factors where it makes sense to automate. If you talk about like being a massage therapist, it's actually a lot of chance, very high chance of injury.
Super repetitive.
It's hard to access motions. Things. Super repetitive motions.
They put a lot of force, for sure. It's like they need massages because giving a massage is intense, kind of thing.
And it's hard to go get and find a massage. And so this is another kind of democratizing trend in itself. But they're doing extremely well. They've got a big team. They are moving fast. And their table works great. I think 2 years ago.
Have you done it?
When I first met. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Because they're here, I just would pop over there, and I was doing the demos, and so I had the healthy portion of caution when I was doing it. But even back then, even 2 years ago, it was actually a fantastic massage, and so it's only better now. So that's been a cool one. How does it
compare? Like, I mean, if you go to like a really good Thai massage. I have a hard time imagining a robot being close to as good as that, but like an average one where they're not as knowledgeable or as focused or things like this, like how do you think of it in terms of quality? And I'm sure that being invested in them, you want to say that's very good, but like how do you think of the quality for everything?
Oh, it's very good. Top tier.
Yeah.
Okay. So no, I'll give you my real answer, which is that it is good, but that you would probably want to start to evaluate it. And you will value your massage slightly differently. You will evaluate the quality of your massage slightly differently.
Because there's quantity. So you can do infinite quantity if you have access to these. You can do
infinite quantity, and you have infinite controllability. And that's what you don't have in a great Thai massage. They're going to do whatever. They're going to put you in a pretzel, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, is this really what I need right now? And you're going to feel great after.
Yeah.
You can tell them, but then you'd have to be speaking the whole time. This, you have so much more control. You can go
click
often,
it on an iPad.
You can get into the routine.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So it's high quality in the sense that you can get exactly what you need. They can provide the pressure that you need. Certainly a person will have more dexterity at the ends of their hands than the robot can. So for, I think, the very high end type of Thai massage, there are places only a person will be able to
get
reach.
for now for this kind of thing.
Get for now.
Yeah.
For now.
It'd be funny to do like, I don't know, machine learning in some way where they're doing reinforcement learning or something like this, or supervised learning, I guess, where you can click and give it a reward at the end, and then it hill climbs to find really good ones for you or something like that. But the space is so difficult that I think that'd be hard, like the optimization space. But
I do love the idea of kind of giving it a digital tip. Like, nice job. Yeah, exactly. That's
love
funny.
It. Don't like it. Whatever. How was it? And also because you have the iPad there, you could like, for everything it's doing, you could give it feedback pretty frequently. You're selecting a spot. How was this last thing? That's a funny thing. So it's kind of like, the way I'm imagining it is it's like between a massage chair and a person, maybe like halfway or a little closer to the person, would you say?
Yeah, I would say it's much closer to a person than a massage chair in terms of how you'll feel and the experience that you'll have.
Yeah, because you're not in the uncomfortable chair and everything too.
Yeah, and those arms have 6 degrees of freedom or even more, and so they can really, they can really get. Now,
does it focus primarily on your back, or does it do like arms, forearms, fingers, like these kinds of things? Because these, I imagine, would be much harder.
Yeah. So when you start talking about fingers and you need that kind of level of dexterity, this thing is mostly here with nubs.
Pressure.
Nubs that are, proprietary, patented, very specially designed nubs, right? They are special and effective.
The technical term, nub. Yeah.
Nubs. They don't have fingers. So
Yep.
they can totally do shoulders, arms, back, legs.
Yep.
But if you're really talking about like getting into small tissue in between bones and joints, that's on the future roadmap. That'll be version 2.
Yeah, I would love like a smaller nub that they could get like, I don't know, in between your shoulder blades or stuff like this. Like that'd be super nice.
And they design it with like quick disconnects to change out the end effects.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think it's more about, to the point you originally made, scale of data and ability to control. And, you know, so I 100% those things will come down the pipeline and are on the roadmap.
What's so exciting about their Series B though? That's so cool. Because that's so have they they've really proven a market with that? Because B, you're scaling for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Generally.
That is the big thing. They have proven that people want this. And there's a few elements to it, which is one, that they are solving a problem that people want massages. They're kind of inaccessible. People have different comfort levels with massages. People want more and less control. Done. That's what you kind of think of. The other piece is that for the customers who are actually adopting this technology, it also provides them some other second order intangible benefits, which is like, hey, more people may come to my gym if there's a massage table here.
Oh yeah, totally. It's a wonderful gimmick too. Yeah, I mean,
wonderful
hotels and stuff too. Like, oh, I'm going to choose the one, like that one has the good exercise stuff, but this one has a robot that massages you. Yeah, for sure.
So even if it didn't work, and it does work really well.
It's a good gimmick.
But even if it didn't work, it provides value to those customers by enhancing the brand, by bringing in more foot traffic and some of those other things. And so that's been cool to see. That's been cool to see them go through, a term I'm just going to throw out now called human acceptance testing instead of user acceptance testing. Human acceptance testing being, it needs to be accepted by humanity broadly. Society, it needs to fit into the ways that we already think about the world and we already think about culture. And from that standpoint, they have nailed their human acceptance testing beyond just the user who actually wants a massage. So that's one of those things that leads to that kind of nonlinear unlock, why they've been able to scale, why they've been able to get that traction, and of course, raise a great round.
I'm sure that they did a good job with this, but I also, thinking about it, I'm having a hard time imagining why it would be so difficult. Because I think people would just go, oh, massage chair, but better. And that kind of thing. But what did they do well for human acceptance testing, or why is it more complex than what I think?
Yeah. Actually, one of the things, I was talking to the CEO about this recently, but they spent a lot of time in 2 phases where I think a lot of deep tech companies don't spend enough time. One of them was actually in the look, the industrial design, the physical mock-ups. They spent a lot of time going through those, making sure there was something that was aesthetic,
pleasing and everything. Has to feel like a luxury experience.
Right. And not a terrifying torture contraption, which it could easily, right. If you and I on first principles were just going to design one of these things, it might be a little bit terrifying. So they spent,
well, it could be. I mean, you get a KUKA arm or some gigantic arm that can move cars or something, like that would be crazy.
That would be scary. Right. So they've got cobots attached to the table, but also the way that it looks, the form factor. They did a lot of looks like prototype where they were literally almost making arts and crafts and sculpture to find out, hey, what do people like? What do they want to have around? What do they gravitate towards?
Cool.
When are they most comfortable? What are they not? That's number one. Number two is they have been brilliant with their marketing. They have been brilliant. So they tapped into lifestyle influencers. They've been on social media. They've had features in the biggest publications. They were on the New York Times Best Inventions for 2024 list. I can't get in the back of a cab without seeing the little ad play in the screen in the back here in New York, because they were so focused on controlling the messaging around it. And that's part of that human acceptance testing of getting through that social, that kind of social evaluation. So very, very clever by the CEO, and not enough robotics companies do this. Not enough deep tech companies
100%
think
agree
about,
with you.
that percent.
Distribution. Distribution is key, and marketing is a huge part of that. So it's really nice to hear about robotics companies doing that well. I feel like a lot of times we nail the tech, less frequently nail the market and the tech, and then less frequently nail the distribution, market, and tech.
That's right. No, absolutely. And so that was one of the things they focus on A lot. It's just making sure that even in a distribution, a key piece is the perception.
100%.
When you go out into an area that's highly dynamic and you actually want AI to interact with people, people's general mode of being is if it looks like garbage, it is garbage. In a car factory, doesn't matter. It just needs to be functional. But out in the real world, you got to be thoughtful with those things.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Okay. Want to bring up one more startup or so?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So this one will be kind of probably more squarely in our energy transition, but also leans in with manufacturing. This one is called Valar Atomics. They just came out of stealth.
Great
with
names for all your companies, by the way.
I think so too. I do think we like to pick back teams that understand how to tell the story, understand how the mission, and naming is probably some piece of that. So maybe I'll go run some analytics on it afterward and see like how many of our best performers had great names. Anyway,
all of them.
Yeah, I'm sure. Valar Atomics, they just came out of stealth with a $19 million seed round, maybe a couple months ago, and they are building nuclear fission reactors. Big seed, but nuclear fission reactors.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, energy is super expensive, I think. I don't know much, but it seems to me to be the case.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the infrastructure costs can be expensive to get set up, but their whole idea is they want to provide energy very cheaply. And they're doing some pretty exciting things. They're not only thinking about they're not thinking about nuclear in the same way that everybody else is. They're not trying to create hydrogen or go through an electrolysis process.
Okay, I don't know anything really about nuclear too. I would love the basics of it. So like my model is you have something, it generates heat, that generates steam, that pushes a turbine, and that makes electricity. But you need something to make the heat, so you make the steam. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So that's traditionally what people use nuclear for, is to create that heat, to create steam. Now, there's a new crop of nuclear of companies, I guess, who are trying to create basically green hydrogen. And some folks are trying to do that with nuclear. These guys, they want to create extremely high heat to create green hydrogen. They want to separate so hot that it separates the water molecules. Then they want to take that hydrogen that's been separated out from the water, and they want to put it through another industrial process where they effectively combine it with carbon dioxide, and they use a process to separate the oxygen from the carbon dioxide, and they get the hydrogen and the carbons to bond together through like a well-known industrial process. So what you're spitting out at the end of this machine is actually hydrocarbons. It's methanol, it's unrefined jet fuel and oil. And so what they actually want to create is nuclear synthetic fuels, green jet fuel, green diesel, green gasoline, net zero gasoline that takes in carbon dioxide, turns it back into fuel. And it's a phenomenal idea because
that's so freaking cool. Yeah.
It's so energy dense. It's the most energy dense transportation. There's already a massive market. Everyone uses hydrocarbons right now. And if you can do that in a way that's actually beneficial for the environment or doesn't hurt it, then your distribution check. You already know that there's a massive market for it. Because you think about it, the biggest oil companies are sovereign nations. So massive market, massive demand if they can get this right. So they are cleverly combining a few different types of science to get to that end goal. And at each step, even if they just create high heat, that can be used for industry to create a variety of raw materials. So they are, they're one we're super excited about to back. And they're out of LA. So one of our examples of a West Coast one.
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I just, the thing I understand is they're taking the normal process and they're making byproducts more productive for this kind of thing. Yeah. So you can also generate energy for that. So it's like you get 2 for the price of 1, or 2 for, I don't know, the price of 1.5 or something like that, which is awesome. Super cool.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so they can get extremely cheap prices for hydrogen, which ultimately leads to cheap prices for hydrocarbons. So very excited about them. And we've got a number of others. We got, just list some off.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Koop.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Koop is awesome. So I did an interview with Sergey a little while ago.
He's awesome.
Yeah, they're sick. Robotics infrastructure or robotics tooling, such a good thing.
Yes. Okay. Man.
So they do insurance, just to say. They're great. Insurance for robotic startups. They're wonderful.
they're wonderful, and they are doing so well because they're betting on a growing industry. Same as we're talking about democratization. Well, if AI is democratizing access to build robots, Koop is insuring them because they all are going to need this liability coverage. And they have found a way to quantify and underwrite the chance that
very
the robot
effectively
misbehaves and doesn't do something it's supposed to do. And they insure that. And because they actually get the pricing right, they can offer very low prices, which you know who likes low prices is startups because they don't have any money. So they are quickly taking the market by offering them, hey, really good insurance at great prices that they can actually underwrite, extremely low loss ratios. And so they're actually super strong. And they, to your point,
I agree,
are an insure tech company. They're not what you would traditionally think of as a deep tech company. But for us, it still fit the mandate because when we talk about democratization and infrastructure, they are the rising tide that will lift all ships. If they make these robots easier to get out into the wild, easier to insure, they also have a compliance product. If they make those things work well, then they pave the way for more deep tech companies to come through. And this is when it spins up that flywheel. It spins up the flywheel. Yeah, it is nice to have a bigger AlleyCorp team because then I can go over to our diversified tech team. They look at InsurTech all the time, and I can say, hey, I can underwrite the quality of the robotics market. You look at InsurTech all the time. Give me an expert opinion here. They quickly looked at it and we said, this is a no-brainer. So Koop with a K, we really like them. Glacier is another one. They do recycling robotics. So they would go into material recycling facilities that process all the recycling from major urban centers. And right now, people are just doing it by hand, sorting, white plastic and cream plastic and this type from that type. And they've got a robotic algorithm which can identify the type of plastic, what it is, and then quickly send an arm to grab it. And it's got like two arms that hang down from the camera, and it will sort them into the bins extremely reliably, quickly, effectively, and some critical infrastructure.
I've seen a number of robotics startups in Europe that are working on this. I don't think any of them have gone anywhere. Why is this hard, and why are they likely to succeed in your perspective?
Yeah. So this is hard for two reasons, probably more than two reasons that I think are top of mind. One of them is that it is a legacy industry that has not seen a lot of automation. And so even when you're trying to make the business case to some of these recycling facilities, they're still trying to figure out how they quantify it, how they measure it, where the gains really are. And they're not always the most excited to adopt robotics. So you really have to have a high ROI. It's one of the reasons why we love Glacier. Second reason why it's hard.
How high is their ROI? Like ballpark?
Yeah. So their ROI
timeline,
will be, in terms of actual payback on the machine. So, I don't want to butcher this, but I think they allow facilities to make their money back within, it's definitely less than a year. But I was going to say 6 months. So something like that.
Well, it's a big difference.
It is a big difference between 6 months and a year. Yes. But what they also allow is for you to really scale up your operations too, if you're a recycling facility.
Interesting.
And one of the things is that I like about them, why I think they're going to be successful, is actually, I think, within their technology. So one of the areas where they shine the most is in their ability to actually identify those materials that are coming down the conveyor, to actually see what kind of plastic it is quickly. And it's actually a very challenging visual problem because they're not sorted well. They're stacked on top of each other. They're dirty. They're folded over. They're crushed. They don't look anything like their original form factor. So you can't even really use standard types of AI and say, this is a can, because it doesn't even look like a can anymore. So that has been their proprietary technology. And one of the founders spent a lot of time doing building vision models for Meta. And that was kind of their core expertise. So they have a phenomenal team. They built tech that's better than anyone else trying to do that. And so that's why we're confident about that.
Cool. So maybe that was the problem with a lot of the European ones, is the labeling was really hard to figure out what's the right type for here and there. And maybe with like modern AI, you're able to very effectively learn which ones go where. And then it can figure out all sorts of clever distinctions that it can pick up on. when sorting.
Yeah, that's 100% it. And then when you actually do that, now you're capturing data that the recycling facility didn't have before. They don't
Totally.
actually know fully what's coming down. They don't know where it's coming from. And there are two
Yeah.
people that care about that. One is a recycling facility, so they understand their operations. Two are the companies who are actually creating the material that gets recycled, whether you are a beverage company or, maybe you make toothpaste bottles or something like that. Now you know what your footprint is if it's actually getting tracked. So they also add this massive digitization layer to the industry, which they've never had before. And they're seeing a lot of really cool traction from the market because of the excitement from that. So I'm excited about that one. Our last one that's maybe more on the mobile side. I mean, we do have more. The last one I'll mention here is called Civ Robotics. They are for the solar panel industry. And what they'll allow you to do is if you're going to go build a large, massive solar field, they have a rover that will go out and it will mark the areas where you need to put the pylon. So it just automates that portion of surveying solar fields. They've got 100 robots in the field, like more than many companies that we see, and they're at an early stage, making money and
nice.
Yeah, growing really fast. So excited about that one too.
Hell yeah. Seems like an awesome portfolio. They seem like all good companies. Okay, so I would love to see just your thoughts on a lot of things related to robotics investment.
Sure.
One of the things that has been interesting to me is I've met a number of companies that I consider quite promising, but at the same time, it doesn't look like their market is large enough to justify venture capital investment. It's like they'll do a thing, they'll be profitable, but they might 10x or 50x or something like this, but it's not like knock it out of the park amazing. So they're getting passed over by a lot of investors. So what it seems to me is it'd be really nice if there was some sort of like robotics investor with a longer time horizon or more conscious of hardware, or it's like fewer bets where the odds of the company succeeding are higher than they typically are in venture capital, where you put a lot into a ton of startups and some are wildly successful and most die out. Do you kind of understand the problem that I'm trying to describe? And
absolutely do.
How do you think of it? Because it makes it so that robotics is hard to fund. And I would really like if there was a better solution for this. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. But I think this goes back to something that I was saying earlier, which is that the rules for deep tech actually still are
being established.
A lot of times, they're still being established. And a lot of investors, I believe, are getting wrong right now is that they're trying to apply the same framework from SaaS onto deep tech.
Yes.
But it's actually very different in terms of how these companies commercialize. To your point, take a little bit more capital up front. They can take longer timelines. But after that, they actually tend to not need as much, whereas a software company needs much less at the beginning. But as it scales, then it actually needs a lot because now you've got competition because your technical differentiation is very challenging to maintain. And so you need to maintain those things through distribution, through brand, through user experience and marketing. So it actually flips it on its head where in the venture world, there's so much risk ahead when you're investing in software. Even if you're solving a great problem, the bulk of your spin, the bulk of your risk mitigation is actually coming down the road. Deep tech's actually a little bit in the reverse. So what it lets you do is say, hey, I know that this is solving a problem. And we try to be really, really quantified about this. It's like, we call it like your value creation multiple. We really try to understand, okay, for every dollar that the robotics company's customer is going to give them, how many dollars can that customer now go get in exchange, either in savings or in increased revenues?
Oh,
and we look
I've seen this in advertising, where it's like if your advertising brings in more than you spend, then it's free advertising and you can keep advertising.
That's right.
So you're saying the same kind of thing from a company perspective because it lets the company scale, and thus it's a no-brainer from the company's perspective. Cool.
So they pay you $1 a month for your robot and they're making $10 a month. That's great. You see a 10x multiple, you know that person is going to try their hardest, they're going to advocate for that. That's making a real difference for the business. Now, if you see something like that, especially at the early stage, that's easier to underwrite. And you made the point about 10x, 50x, that's not the 100, 1000x. You're right. But consider that a 10x venture capital fund is a top decile fund. That is one of the best performing funds in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So what it means is that actually, if you can bring together 10 and 50s, you're going to have a phenomenal fund, even though it doesn't look like the traditional software fund. And I really attribute that to kind of the late stage capital bias that happens in software, which certainly later stage deep tech companies need to raise money, but it's more about scaling. I think it's a little bit more understood. And it's harder to rip out a robot after you put one in than it is to switch software accounts. So that also starts to give them a little bit more staying power, a little bit less risk as they mature. What it means is that you can feel slightly more confident if you see a very high value creation multiple in your early stage robotics company, that they are going to create some amount of value going forward. And so even if it's a smaller market, you think, hey, we can get a very valuable company here. We can get one where we can make enough money for it to make sense for our venture firm. That's kind of one reality to it, and why it kind of makes sense at the early stage. Also, though, well, actually, I'll stay on the smaller markets. What also tends to happen is a lot of these can tend to be not exactly winner take all, but have a very strong leader follower effect, where you can become the best in industry. You can become an industry standard. And I think part of that is because it's physical.
I don't quite get what you mean. I'm not sure what you're linking this idea to. What do you mean? Leader follower effect and what?
Oh yeah. So here's what I think is that if you are an e-commerce company and you have the option of using the same hardware software that Amazon uses, or you could just use some random one off the shelf, which one are you going to do? You're probably going to do the Amazon one.
Yeah,
and so
all things equal, for sure.
All things equal, for sure. And I think with robotics, because reliability is such a key parameter, if you see something working in the wild, you're very, very much more likely to go ahead and try to implement that yourself. And that's what I mean by the leader follower effect. The leaders in the industry tend to pull along the others.
A lot of others. Yeah.
So that's why you see, like, even you can even see it in classic machinery. Like, how many types of robot arms are there out there? Yaskawa, ABB, Fanuc, Kuka, UR. There's 5, right? That's it. Because they take so much of the market. So there's much more like concentration tends to be, and they tend to have a very strong pull for the rest of the market. So even if it's a smaller TAM, you can capture a lot more of that than you could with software. Like, how many accounting softwares are there? Infinite.
Yeah, I know. And how many CRMs are there and all this other stuff?
That's right.
Infinite. Yeah.
So that's the point that I was making.
That's a cool point. I like that. I like that concentration related point. Okay, hell yeah.
But also, deep tech companies have the biggest markets too, right? Providing energy to the world is enormous. So it doesn't always have to be that way. And we do personally like to have a mix of things that we think can have a big proportion of a small market and also play in a massive TAM. So,
yeah, you can have some moonshots in your portfolio, because if that works, it'll be freaking incredible.
That's right.
And the other ones are very likely to be successful, but may not be like, I don't know, $1 trillion companies or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you, where I think robotics has a bigger moat than most software companies. Like, once some company makes some good UI and has some feature and proves itself to be a good company, then you'll get a ton of competitors that all do the similar thing. And so that very small competitive moat. And so it's like, that's when it's like all distribution, all the advertising, as you were mentioning. Whereas robotics, there's a million hard problems that a robotics company needs to solve to deploy and be reliable. And it's a much higher cost for this kind of thing for new entrants to go in to figure out all that again. It's almost like starting a completely different startup.
Yeah, exactly. And the last piece I would say, and this is not generally how venture capitalists think, but the last piece I will say is, if one of those companies does fail, there's a lot of valuable IP that's created in that process. And so the failures tend to not be quite as severe, because you can still sell it off for parts, so to speak, because there's a ton of IP generated. Now, again, we're not playing for the downside. We're playing for the upside. But when you're just talking about what sort of an outcome do you expect? Well, we're not expecting to have 50% of our companies be zeros, because we don't even think the floor for these is zero. Even if they went out of business today, there's a lot of IP that's still valuable to somebody.
That's cool. I haven't thought of it from an IP perspective. I think you're right there. Yeah, I mean, the software you develop, the infrastructure you develop for manufacturing, the know-how you develop, the founders you cultivate, like all that is really valuable. So it's a nice way to look at it too. And you can sell off the hardware, worst case.
Yeah.
So hell yeah. Okay. Any other things when thinking of that? Those were all very good points. I really thought that was a good answer.
Yeah, not so much in terms of thinking about like the TAM thing. I mean, I think often about like,
and TAM is total addressable market. Just
that's right.
If people didn't know, so like how much could you possibly make if you had all of it for this kind of thing?
That's exactly right. Yeah, how many of these things are bought in a year? How many people around the world use it? Is that a big number of people? Small number of people? And I think one thing, I guess maybe I'll say, and curious to hear your thoughts, and if it jives with what you're seeing and hearing from other robotics founders. But what feels different now compared to robotics investing 5-10 years ago is not only the transformation in technology, but the speed at which the founders are moving. I think some of that is because, again, we talked about the education that they got at some of those more mature deep tech companies. Some of it's because the practice of entrepreneurship has become more quantified. Some of it is because AI tools are speeding people up. But the hardware companies of today, you could even take, for example, Figure Robotics. Within a couple years, they're in talks to raise around $1.5 billion round at $39 billion valuation.
Crazy.
It is crazy. But the speed at which that company moves is much more like how software traditionally thinks. And so you're seeing some of that come over into robotics. That, I think, is fundamentally the biggest difference in why some of these companies are being successful. I also think it's one of the things that not enough founders are getting correct, which is just ship, create new iterations, try new things, test subsystems and put them in, do it in a low cost way. Just do enough to test the critical function and get it back in. And you should be really going through those iterations as fast as you can. I had a company tell us that they made over 100 different iterations of their robot in a period of like 6 months. And this wasn't 100 like design conceptualizations. It was 100 physical instantiations of their robot. Wow. And now most of those were small
tweaks. Yeah.
Small tweaks, but they're doing it because they're getting it in front of it. They have a customer come to their shop and they put it in front of them and they have them try it and they observe and then they make a bunch of changes. They were doing things, 3D printing subsystems, sticking it together with like putty and stuff, just enough so they could test the core system. And then if it worked, they'd go and do a full build out and they'd integrate it into their design. But they were going through those revs so fast. And to my point about learning, that's what makes all the difference. And actually in like robotics manufacturing, the actual process of building the robot itself is so key for the quality of the robot. Going through the manufacturing, just to go through the manufacturing, teaches you how to make it quickly, where you could trim out waste, how to get those parts to sync well together. And so you can come out with a product that's very reliable and very low cost. And then you can see, hey, where can we actually increase quality? Where do our failures tend to be? And then you can increase quality. So I think that's actually one of the reasons why, for example, China, DJI, Unitree, a bunch of their other robotics initiatives are growing so quickly, is because if you're in Shenzhen, you go pick up the parts within hours. You stick it in, you'll do another rev. And the more you do those revisions, the more you're actually understanding the hardware. Whereas I think there has been too much of a traditional approach of thinking about, okay, we'll order a part, it gets here in weeks, we'll test it in weeks, and then we'll make a change. And there's just no way to compete with a feedback loop that slow. And the software doesn't operate that way. They're shipping new version every single day. So the best robotics companies are moving much more towards that axis. And I think, honestly, U.S. has certainly an advantage in terms of IP, technical know-how, talent, but there's it's almost no replacement for that manufacturing speed. And so that's what I want to see from a lot of startups, is just going through those cycles as fast as possible. Leads to good outcomes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things that I notice with this related, so I've been podcasting with RoboHub and then SenseThink Act and now the Audrow Nash podcast for like 12 years or something like that. And so I've been interviewing startups this whole time. And the thing that stands out to me is companies are becoming market focused. And that makes it so that they're pragmatic and they get out there quickly and they learn versus just being happy with the technology. A lot of people, it seems like, were just building things because they enjoyed building things and they weren't going to the customers, and they would move slowly to perfect it before ever putting it in front of a customer. And I feel like I've seen a very large change in the types of people that are founding companies now in the last few years. And I'm curious to talk about like a thing that I've noticed. So I'm in Texas. I'm talking to a lot of the robotics community in Texas. In my opinion, and maybe this is an area for you guys to look into more, but I've met a lot of the best market-focused founders here of anywhere I've been. I lived in the Bay for a while, and I'm from New England, and I was out in Michigan for a while and things like this. But it's an interesting thing, and I think that them being market-focused leads to them being pragmatic and making choices where they can iterate quickly. They try to get the product in front of customers quick, get the customer paying early, all these things like this. But do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, yes, but let me just make sure I understand your question correctly. You're talking about like location, like within Texas. Are we seeing things, or you're talking about in general market focus?
Well, you asked how what I thought was the speed thing, and I don't fully know what it is, because a lot of the things you mentioned, AI, better open source software, them coming out of these great companies. So then my thought is, I don't know why this is occurring, but I'm seeing a different breed of founder in the last years. Yeah. And then a little thing within there was I'm seeing really good ones in Texas, which is really interesting to me. But kind of digression for this kind of thing.
We too are seeing really good ones in Texas. Actually, we have companies in Texas too.
Yeah.
We're seeing really good ones in Texas. And it's fun to see the tech hub emerge there. Mm-hmm. What I'll say is you're 100% spot on about the founders who now have a market focus. And I think there's a function of a couple things. One of the big things is that some of the enabling technologies have made robotics more accessible, deep tech more accessible, and actually building a hardware product more accessible. What that means is that if you're an expert now in logistics, you can come up with a robotics idea, even if your background training is not in robotics. And that was never the case before, when you had to have the researchers doing everything fully custom. So when you get that, you have a person who not only knows how to move with the culture, like the cultural speed of business and entrepreneurship, but you have someone who's got a very deep insight into what the actual problem was, which was the missing link in the past when you had researchers coming out and saying, hey, wouldn't someone want to use this great gizmo? And it was like, it's great, but I don't understand how to use it. Now they know exactly not only how it should be used, but again, the human acceptance testing, how people think about using it, how it fits with their preconceived model of the world and their preconceived model of their business operation. So I think what you're saying is 100% correct. And we're actually seeing many of our CEO of Aescape, not a classical roboticist, came from the lifestyle industry. And that's why he's doing so well here. Many of our CEOs, not classical roboticists, but industry experts. And they have a brilliant wizard of a CTO and engineering team, of course. But I think what you're seeing is indicative of the fact that there's more interest in it and there's more accessibility to start to build a deep tech company than there was in the past.
I think you're spot on. I think that's it. It's probably accessibility and making it so that people who are market focused rather than just like super amazing roboticists can start these companies. That's super cool. What do you, so one thing that I notice about a lot of investment firms, you guys included, is it's a lot of pre-seed to Series A, are the ones that I think of that are primarily focusing explicitly on robotics. It gets harder when
Yeah.
you get, I mean, even like, you guys are saying you're seed and pre-seed, mostly sometimes Series A, and I'm seeing that quite a bit. Why do you think that is? And do you think, like, first, do you agree? Second, why do you think that is, if it's true? And then, where do you imagine this going in the future? Like, will you guys have big wins and then start investing in later ones in 5 years? Or how do you think of the investment ecosystem, and why are we mostly pre-seed and seed?
Yeah. So definitely have some thoughts on that, but I think it's
Mm-hmm.
mainly about the newness of the emerging class,
Mm-hmm.
the emerging asset class of deep tech. And I think to be a good investor right now, today in robotics, you got to understand the technology. You got to understand
Yeah.
AI. You got to understand it fundamentally. And if you're somebody who understands it fundamentally, you either have a engineering or operations kind of a background or whatever sort of insight, you're most useful at the early stage. You're most useful to your founders. You can provide the most kind of advice there. And that's one of the things that we do. I mean, we provide, of course, all this sort of business advice, but there's been a number of times when we've been saying, hey, here's how we have seen companies in general approaching their supply chain challenges. Here's how we've seen them approach their sort of initial pilot design. And then one of the things we do, which is great about having a deep tech portfolio, is when one company has a question, I just offer it to the rest of the portfolio. I had somebody say, hey, I need to build a looks like prototype. And I was just telling you, Aescape did that so well. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
you need to talk to the CEO of Aescape. And they figured it out. So there are shared learnings that are beginning to be developed as well within the portfolio that those learnings are still happening at such early stages in the companies. That's part of where we can be most useful. So that's from the founder perspective. Those early stage investors can be most useful in deep tech. Now, actually, from the investor perspective, because a lot of those investors have the core insight that I was talking about or that background experience, that's actually where we can be the best investor. Because I've got an operating background, I believe that I have an edge when I'm looking at an aerospace manufacturing robotics company and I can understand, hey, this could be used, this wouldn't be used, this would be actually scaled, this wouldn't. Here's what we've seen. There's less of a question of, will this tech work? Does anybody want it at the later stages? And that's where you would probably have a more classically financially oriented investor underwriting that. And so that's why I think, just because where the industry is, the tech's changing so fast, many of the investors, and us especially, we are specialists, and the specialist makes the best decisions, has the most differentiated judgment and perspectives, and can be most useful at the early stage. Now, when we talk about where's it going to go, that will absolutely continue. People continue to specialize. But I think you'll also see greater expansion into those later stages. I'm not totally sure. That's probably not what we're doing at AlleyCorp. Again, our advantage is being operators. We're early stage. That's where we like to be. That's where we're going to stay. But I think you'll see more of an emerging market to kind of provide capital for that crossing the chasm phase. I think that's going to take time. What I said at the beginning was that the rules of deep tech are still unwritten. And I think we're going to start to see companies that are doing really well in the market. And in some ways, the investing landscape will have to catch up and say, oh, this is the kind of thing I want to fund. One thing we do also see, though, is that right now, it still can make sense even for there to be Series B, Series C deep tech investors. I think they can actually do really well due to what I think is a short-term information gap right now, inefficiency in the market, which is that
some asymmetry.
Yeah, which is that if we go and build a robot, there's a huge difference between that robot being 85 and 90, 90 and 99, 99 and 99.999% reliable. As engineers, we would see that. We'd say, oh my goodness, this thing is ready to ship. It's ready for commercialization. But what may be lagging from that standpoint is the size of the commercial traction and revenues. You may have many interested pilots. You may have small orders and deployments. It will take some time to get those in the field. You'll have to do some debugging. The customer will have to use it and try and interact with it. And so even though we know that these companies that maybe they've gone from their Series A, they're trying to get their Series B, and they've really increased their reliability. They've got deployments in the field, and it's much more reliable. Even though we know that's a big difference, some of the investors right now aren't actually recognizing that as real traction because they're not trained to think that way. I don't think it will stay that way forever, but for those investors who are willing to jump in and do have the key insight, are looking for the right signals, what it means is that sometimes your Series A to Series B prices are not changing as much as the value of the company itself is actually changing. And so I think you can actually get cheap prices in a way if you are a savvy Series B, Series C investor right now. And so we try to maintain good relationships with those kind of people that we think have a great perspective. So I actually do think there's a lot of room to win as a slightly later stage investor, and then over time that will mature.
Yeah, that's my impression too. I think that they're not, as you said, they're not trained to see that way. And thus, it's very, very difficult to get a Series B funding as a robotic startup. A can be difficult too, but B is like a lot of companies die when they're reaching for their B round, or at least are like they get unfavorable terms, or they get a like A bump up or something like this. But who are the specific? I would love if you can name some of the companies that you find very good for Series B, like A or B investment in robotics companies.
Yeah, for sure. Man, there's a bunch. So I want to shout out some of my friends. But some of the ones we like to work with a ton are like Eclipse Ventures. We really respect the way that they think about it and they do their work. And they're willing to find a winner, back them, believe in them, and kind of see them through later rounds. F Prime, they do some of the best robotics investing around.
Yeah, Prime's great.
You know them?
I had Sanjay on a little while ago.
Sanjay's wonderful. And they have some really well-developed thoughts and some insights.
They probably do A, right? I don't think they do much later.
They do some...
do they do B?
They actually will do some B. Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
for
okay.
sure.
That's awesome.
But probably end there. We will do things with like Google Ventures. We will do things, of course, with the other names, the Luxes, the Andreessens, the Koslas. NEA has been a great partner for us too. So, yeah, definitely an ecosystem that's emerging. And as interest in robotics grows in general, we're seeing more people play there. Valar Equity is another great one to shout out. They're a great firm. So we see more investors kind of getting interested in and jumping into. But yeah, we definitely have friends we like to send it to and talk to.
Hell yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's good to know. On a related note, I'll ask after too, but I would love to interview some of the people from these companies to get their perspective too. I would love a connection to any of the people from those companies. Just I know a bunch of investors that are like seed, pre-seed through like kind of A. And it'd be nice because there's so many companies that are at Series A and they're really struggling finding good investors. So, okay, hell yeah.
Man, that'll be a wonderful guest. And I'd be super curious to hear what they say to you too, right? Yeah. That'd be super cool.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. You mentioned a lot of interesting things. I'm kind of at a loss for which to go with. I would love to hear your perspective. Actually, so let's do kind of rapid fire because we're coming around to the end of the thing. I would love to, and I mean like a few minutes on each one. Okay. I'd love to hear your perspective on humanoids.
Oh, yeah. So humanoids, one of the most complex robotics challenges out there. So you think about really robotics needs to be this harmony between the software and the hardware for every individual element, and you need them to be able to understand and work together in concert. And humanoids are adding so many axes and degrees of freedom. And then you're throwing them in highly dynamic environments with like very unscripted and open-ended. So it's extreme. It's robotics on hard mode. That's
super hard mode.
So we believe in the ability for people to build these in a platform where people will experiment in them. I right now hesitate to jump in on humanoids. We haven't backed a humanoid company yet. And a lot of that is derived from what I was telling you before, but one of the key metrics we look at, which is your value creation multiple. If you want to create a lot of value for your customer, it's super low, right? Right now, they're expensive, they're unreliable, and
they don't do that much too.
And they don't do that much.
Yeah.
So it's hard to create a value creation metric. So when we're trying to be principled right now, when we look at it, we're saying, okay, we still think verticalized robotics platforms are, I mean, they are what has been taking the majority of the funding, but we think they'll continue to do that in the interim. Now, I do expect there'll be some kind of hybrid that has more generalized capability and intelligence, but isn't quite at the full humanoid level. So maybe beyond just moving apart from A to B, it'll move from A to B and package it and sort it, that sort of thing. So I think it'll
just have a mobile base with one arm for that.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to be humanoid, which right now still very hard to do. But I do believe that the cost of humanoids, the challenge of humanoids will come down. I just think we're still a few years out.
Do you have any guess on the timeline? Like, is it 5 years? Is it 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15, whatever you think?
You know, a year
it's hard to
ago,
predict.
It's hard to predict. A year ago, I would have told you, that we were probably, maybe 2 years ago, I would have told you we're 10 years out. But even within the last couple of years, the breakthroughs for robotics, for embodied intelligence, as they call it, which is AI for robots, have been dramatic. And you see skill, you see physical intelligence, you see efforts at NVIDIA for Project Group, you see World Labs, all these efforts to say, hey, how can we dramatically scale up the training data, make the AI systems robust such that robots can learn very fast. And I guess actually Google's RT2, RTX models were some of the progenitors of all of this and kicked it off.
So much good work came out of Google for all this. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And they're still doing it. And the DeepMind folks, I mean, really blown away. But I guess to say, what does that say? In the last 12, 18 months, we have seen more innovation in robotics AI than we have in the last 5 or 10 years. So whereas 2 years ago, I probably would have told you 10 years out. I probably think we're probably 5 years out. Now, before we see a humanoid doing something useful.
That's a pretty low bar for that thing. That's pretty funny. Like the big build up to be like something useful.
Something useful. By useful, I mean creating more value than it costs.
Yeah. I agree. I'm not sure on the timeline. The thing that I am not convinced on is the reliability of the systems and safety of the systems. But I'm very happy to be proven wrong. I would absolutely love to have a humanoid in the house doing stuff. But
yeah,
we'll see.
That is absolutely the challenge. But I think we're seeing some parallels where reliability and safety, they really do just take time out there in the wild. And so even you see Waymo raising $6 billion, they're now deployed in Arizona, California, Texas, Georgia, right? They are getting out there. They are collecting the data, and there's really nothing to replace that kind of a thing. So I just think that happens a little bit with deployments in time.
Let's see. These next two, I wonder if we can lump them together. Deglobalization. So you mentioned deglobalization at some point, or at least the idea of it occurring, and China. Tell me about these.
Yeah. So, the real forces happening right now. Some people looked at their supply chain infrastructure from during the COVID times when it was hard to get anything as well. But now, with changes in administration, changes in the global climate, there is more of a feeling of, hey, will America be able to keep up from a technological standpoint with other places in the world? You see that China was getting was getting like humanoid robotics, at least from the US, but the number of even industrial robotics that are fully made, sourced, and bought in China is really increasing within China. So, like their global share of the market for robotics is probably 50%. It probably was like only 30% 5 years ago, even.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that's what I'm telling you about iteration speed in manufacturing. Now manufacturing and robotics are so interlinked that the better your robotics are, the better your manufacturing is, the better you can manufacture robots at low cost and high quality. And so it really is a productive flywheel. And that's what I think not enough founders do. I actually think it'd probably be worthwhile for more robotics founders to just go spend a week or two in Shenzhen and see how it's actually being built, because it will be so mind blowing. And that's one of the trips we have scheduled later this year at AlleyCorp to go get boots on the ground. So I think, like, for example, Unitree Robotics is one of their top robotics companies out of Hangzhou. And they are really putting a lot of emphasis behind it. China, like, is putting a lot of emphasis behind them and believes in them. And in some ways, I mean, we actually see them doing some interesting demos, dancing, doing choreography, whereas even Tesla Optimus is like not doing stuff quite like that. So in some ways you're seeing, they actually are starting to look something that could be more of a viable humanoid. And then there are many commitments by the administration, by private companies they are expaying to say, hey, we're going to spend $14 billion on robotics over the next 10 years. So they're just really, really all in, seeing that as kind of an edge. And I think that's absolutely driving innovation forward. I think that, for something like that to happen now, we need more of these startups to
Do you mean in the U.S.? Now in the U.S.?
In the U.S. Sorry, now in the U.S. It's probably twice as expensive or more to build a similar robot arm completely sourced in the U.S. versus there. So if you think about, okay, people are trying to build redundant supply chains here, it's going to be more expensive. I think we need to leverage some of the advantages that we have, some of the advantages in technology and talent. We just talked about all the great stuff coming out of DeepMind. If we are going to try to build capabilities that other folks don't have. And a lot of that needs to give us the ability to iterate. So those are kind of my higher level thoughts, but they right now are positioning themselves to reach extremely high levels of automation and have autonomous factories and things in it. And
yeah. What do you think about the U.S. and Mexico? Like a lot of manufacturing could be done in Mexico.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I personally, have liked it, and think that nearshoring approach makes a lot of sense. And you can take advantages from differences in labor costs and still be close by. So for me, that feels like a great path forward. And I know that some companies are working on that and building some factories there.
Okay. Oh yeah. So last thing before starting to close, do you, I would love to hear what you think, given all of the attention on embodied AI and just all the hype around robotics at this time. What do you think is hype and what do you think is reality? Like, and how do you think about these two things? Because I mean, a big part of being a successful investor is distinguishing these two things, hype and reality. How do you think about it, and where do you think we actually are?
Look, there have been transformative breakthroughs, step level changes. What I would posit is that the only companies that are actually benefiting right now from AI, the demos that we're saying, oh, they're so interesting, it's really just kind of pick and place, or, pick and shove. They're saying, oh, watch this cook a fancy meal, but the onions are all chopped, the carrots are sliced, and it's just moving. It's just pushing around the carrots in a bowl. It's just pick and place. It's just, we can do faster object identification and put a thing from here to there. And it's super important to be able to recognize an object, to understand where should I pick it up, where should I grab it. But they're not doing some of those more more kind of intense and dexterous and complicated tasks right now. I mean, they couldn't unroll a ravel of tape even. So it's, so when you're thinking about, okay, packaging things up, most of it's still done with classic automation. It'd be very hard even to like fold up a box. It's all kind of still just pick and place. And we're seeing these awesome models, these vision language Ashkin models, like, Google's got their Gemini robotics model that they are showing some cool breakthroughs in terms of the robot understanding its environment. But I think there needs to be a little bit more time for hardware to catch up, for dexterity, and I guess proprioception, which would be the robot's own ability to understand where it is in space and how to move. People are working on things like that. People are, making different actuators that work more like muscle fibers such that robots can move more like humans, which the value of that is then they can actually learn better from humans slightly more in a transferable way, from like a recording of a humanoid or et cetera. But right now we seem a little bit capped still. And I think I'm personally kind of waiting to see, okay, who can do the next level of utility. If you're going to have a generalized platform, you need a little bit more generalized function than what I think we're seeing.
Then pick and place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because pick and place, I mean, we've been able to do that for a long time. Now we can do it with AI.
Right.
But yeah. Okay. And maybe looking out 3 or 5 years, what's your outlook on the robotics industry? I bet you're pretty bullish on it, but I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I absolutely am bullish on it. I think that we're going to see robotics enter domains where they haven't classically been the same. I think that, for example, retail is going to be a big space. And actually, we started looking at this and thinking about this, and that's what brought us to that EyeBot investment in the first place. Is we were just looking at where the labor shortages were going to be the most intense. We saw retail was a big space. We looked at our deal flow, like the last 1,000 robotics companies we had seen, and we saw and mapped those onto the spaces actually where labor shortages are predicted. What we saw was that there was a disproportionately low amount of robots that we were pitched in the retail space, despite the fact that there were going to be high labor shortages. That to us made us think there's an opportunity for people to build here. We think that good retail solutions, robotics retail solutions can do quite well. That's what made us identify EyeBot, which is fits in a little bit into that retail model. So classically under automated areas, retail, we think hospitals, agriculture in some ways, we think possibly even more domestic situations like within offices. We're seeing some folks start to build businesses there. It's been pretty interesting. I think those will be areas where we see there's been a lot of effort around robotics and cooking. I think that's probably slightly further out, but automation within those areas where classically there hasn't been a lot are ripe areas in our mind.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on a lot of those spaces. I think cooking is a long way out. And agriculture, I think I'm really excited about a lot of the outdoor mobile robots, like agriculture, mining, maybe like moving stuff around a construction site, these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And simple things like bot built, and they're not simple, but things like framing, for example. Very exciting.
Very exciting. We've looked hard at that kind of robotic housing sector. We really want to make a bet there. We haven't yet, but would love to. And I totally agree with you. It's right on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. So what do you hope people take away from this interview?
So 2 things. One, I think that I would love for them to think of AlleyCorp as some of the most forward-thinking robotics investors at the early stage and deep tech investors across manufacturing, aerospace, robotics. So yes, please think of us. I would love for them to start to think of the Northeast and the deep tech ecosystem there. So into it, build in it. Really consider it. And then I would love for more deep tech founders to think about how they're building quickly. Think about those iteration cycles. Think about how can you actually speed this up from a first principle standpoint as well. Because I think we need we need a lot of great winners, one, to attract talent, to attract capital, but also to bring those innovations to people who need them and create that value. So I think those are some of the big things. And I also think more robotics companies should market themselves, because it's great for people to see what humanity can do with this kind of technology now.
Totally agree. Hell yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on, and I appreciate talking with you.
Audrow, thank you so much for having me. This was a great time.
Hell yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.